Okay, so about that explanation I was talking about. Again, before I get to it though, on top of everything I mentioned in part one, as the episode ends and they find and retrieve the captain, Captain Janaway and Tom Paris, and bring him back, one of the things on top of the fact that this made no sense, that the plot basically was one of the most screwed up ideas ever, the idea of evolution becoming more of a de-evolution back into what came out of the water, salamander-like creatures, was stupid. The fact that they have offspring was stupid. How about the fact that they get restored just like that? Yeah. Instead of playing with the idea that maybe, just maybe, you could do maybe several episodes. Because I think this is what, to me, because this to me is what I believe could have redeemed this episode, this idea in some ways. Is if you spent several episodes focusing on trying to restore the captain and Tom Paris back to human form. Instead of overnight, if you know what I mean. It would have been more interesting, more compelling. Because possibly from a story perspective, maybe the captain and Tom Paris have gotten so used to the new forms in, less than 3 days, as crazy as it sounds, that maybe they don't want to change back. And you could work with that in a sense, in a way, and make it make sense. And actually give this episode a purpose. But they didn't do that. They just said, okay, just like that, you're cured, you're back to normal. But then, here's what's the insulting part about it. Here's what's really insulting to fans. You have the captain, who's one of the most popular characters probably in Star Trek television history as far as captains go. Did you have basically her inciting and kind of hinting that Tom Paris's character, when they were the salamander creatures, was not the one that probably initiated the mating, the sex between them. That instead, it was her. That she could have been the one, and maybe was the one that initiated it. So yeah. And you know what makes fans pissed off about that? Yeah, Janaway could be written to a point that maybe she would want to get in the mood with somebody, but not like that. Basically, she's the kind of character that has enough dignity and enough pride and enough self-esteem to say, I'm not that kind of person. I'm not that way. But you have her come out and say, hey, when we were salamanders, guess what? I may have been the one, or I probably was the one that initiated the whole, hey, let's get it on deal. And this is why, just like I mentioned in part one, this is why this episode is the most critically panned episode probably in the history of Star Trek, maybe along with Genesis and maybe a few others. But this is right at the top of the list, if not at the top of the list. It's one of the most screwed up, what the blank episodes were they thinking, ever done. So bad to the point, which made it so bad to the point that it was taken, like I said in part one, out of texture, thrown out of continuity, and that was it. It was done. No more. But here's what's interesting, though. Even though it is physically, let me check my time here. Okay, enough time. Even though it is physically no longer in existence, if you will, not physically, but even though chronologically, I should say, even though chronologically it is no longer in existence, it's still physically there. There's still a physical reminder. Why? Because the DVD set, individual season sets, an overall box set, complete series set, whether it's DVD and probably eventual Blu-ray, the episode is still physically there. It is. It's kind of like when you take It's kind of like when you take what Marvel Comics did with Spider-Man in One More Day. It's like, okay, you can use the One More Day arc to basically make him single again and let him be the Spider-Man that doesn't need to be tied down or anything, thus rebooting somewhat most of the franchise. But in a sense, every issue that takes place before that One More Day incident physically exists. Every story, even though every story that came before One More Day was literally thrown out the window, thrown out of the continuity, thrown out of context, and basically became non-existent, those stories still physically exist in the physical issues. So there's no denying, there's no getting away from the fact that those stories happen, that those events happened. You know, it's the same thing with the whole Mecha Sally arc. You know, I've come out and I've basically said, look, I've never been a fan of it, but I do understand why they did it. I do understand why they wanted to do it. But you take a look at what happened with 252, you take a look at Countdown to Chaos, and with the exception that Nicole was basically the key that helped restore a majority of the main freedom fighters' memories of the old world, everything that happened before Worlds Collide and before Countdown to Chaos never happened. Even though physically we have the issues, we see the stories as we read the issues, because of Countdown to Chaos and 252 being soft retcons, reboots, like I said, with the exception that the characters themselves have the memories restored thanks to Nicole of the old world. Everything that happened before then, though, never really happened. Because I guess according to the writers, as time goes on, memories of the new world start to overtake the memories of the old. So yeah, basically, that's basically what Threshold of the Star Trek Voyager episode Threshold is. It's basically the same thing. You know, that episode, it's physically on the DVD set, individual series, season, or overall series DVD set, maybe Blu-ray set. It's physically there, but it's non-existent. It never happened, but yet it's physically there to physically remind us that it did happen. I mean, think about it. Let's say you go out and you buy let's say you buy the eventual Blu-ray of Star Trek Voyager, and you're missing an episode. Quite understandable why this episode would be missing, but yet let's say you go to Wikipedia, TV.com, IMDb, whatever, all these Star Trek-like fan sites, and you notice that there's one episode, and you notice an episode listing, and you see one episode from season 2, and you say, well, wait a minute. Why is this episode not on the Blu-ray set or the DVD set? And it's all because of the fact that the episode was taken out of context, taken out of continuity, right? So even if they find that out, some people might say, okay, fine, I can understand it, but it still should physically be there. It's in the episode listings, it should still physically be there. And that's what I'm getting at. The fact that the episode physically still exists, it doesn't, chronological wise, doesn't exist. It's like it's physically there, but it's really not there. Just like I said, with the whole Spider-Man One More Day deal, the whole Countdown to Chaos 252 deal in Sonic, heck, even with DC's New 52 back in 2011. You know, some of the events still happened and are still kind of embedded in some of the characters' minds. They sort of still happened, but some other events and stuff never did. And you know, that is the one thing. You may not like something, you may hate it with a passion, you may feel it's the worst thing that's ever happened. Worst thing that ever could have been created, but yet it's still physically there. yet it's still physically there. And that's the thing. It's still physically there. You could take it out of context, take it out of the continuity, guess what? It's still physically there. Let me give you an example. Transformers, right? Let's see what we got here. Alright, let's take the episode Sea Change, if you will. Let's take the episode Sea Change. Alright, let's take that from Transformers Generation 1. Now, as good of an episode as that is, there are some people that pretty much feel that it's stupid. There are some that probably feel it's a stupid episode. That doesn't make sense. That basically you have a character, a female character that Sea Spray falls for, and vice versa, and she uses a lagoon to can turn you into anything you want, and she becomes a female Autobot, and yet you don't play with that. You don't go back and revisit the idea of, oh, you know, she can be a robot again, or want to keep her a robot so she can be with Sea Spray. I mean, it's, you know, some people would look at that and be like, why did they even make this episode? It makes no sense. You know, it's kind of like with the death of Optimus Prime in Transformers the movie. Okay? You know, it's kind of like with the death of Optimus Prime. You know, physically it's there. Physically, visually it happened. I mean, visually it did happen. But guess what? Him being brought back was a result of the fact that nobody wanted to believe it happened. People basically, like the title of this top 10 countdown article, the worst episodes that we wish never happened and pretend worst episodes ever made and we wish never happened and pretend never did. His death in Transformers the movie is the same way. Basically, they wish it never happened. They want to pretend it never happened. So what happens? To make sure people are satisfied and they're happy, he gets returned to he gets resurrected, if you will, brought back to life in Return of Optimus Prime. First in Dark Awakening, and then in Return of Optimus Prime. And why? Because fans did not want to accept the fact that he was killed in Transformers the movie. Even though visually it happened, there are people that pretend it didn't. And that's the truth. And that is why when you take a look at something like the episode Threshold for Star Trek Voyager, I agree. It is a complete mess, and there is no reason for why it was made. So I agree with taking it out of the context and making it a one-shot deal. But even if you take it out of the continuity context, it's still there. It's visually and from a DVD, Blu-ray set-wise, it's still physically there. There's nothing you can do about it. So, the way I look at it, if you really want to get rid of this episode, get rid of it. That's the way I look at it. You want to get rid of things in stories that now no longer mean anything? Get rid of them. Erase them. That's how I look at it. But that's my thoughts on this whole Star Trek Voyager Threshold hatred, if you will, or dislike. So let me know what you guys think, and comment down below, and I'm sorry this was in 2 parts.